There are people who speak beautifully, argue brilliantly, and can explain every concept with countless references. They may quote book after book, and sometimes it feels as though they stand at the highest level of intelligence. Their words sound like treasures drawn from an endless library, yet they do not live what they speak. And then there are others quiet, few in words, not seeming to know much, yet a single sentence from them, a look in their eyes, or simply the way they live can stop us in silence. Something deep within us feels awakened. This is why true wisdom cannot be measured by the amount of knowledge one collects, but by the depth of life one embodies. In this age, flooded with information, the difference between knowing and seeing becomes more and more important. Knowing is accumulation. Seeing is awakening. Knowing can be copied. Seeing cannot be transferred. Knowing happens in the head. Seeing happens in a conscious mind. And it is right there where wisdom truly begins. So why is it that some people spend their whole lives learning and yet remain stuck in ignorance? Why is it that others who have never read a single book of philosophy live with profound clarity and compassion? The answer lies in the very nature of wisdom itself. Wisdom unfolds in layers, and everyone is living, thinking, and acting from a certain layer of wisdom. That layer determines what they see, what they understand, and how they live. In today's talk, let us walk together through the 5 layers of wisdom. This is not a theory, not a ranking system, but a map for you to locate where you are on your own inner journey. Not another thing to memorize, but an invitation to notice. Right now, as you are listening, which layer of wisdom is alive in you? Layer 1, borrowed wisdom. This is where most of us begin. At this stage, our understanding relies completely on what others have spoken, written, or taught. Knowledge here does not arise from lived experience, but from memory, repetition, and imitation. It's like a mirror, reflecting light from elsewhere, shining only because of another source, never its own. People at this layer are easily convinced by things that sound right or sound profound, especially when those words come from someone famous or from a book with a great reputation. They can speak about love, about enlightenment, about selflessness, about the essence of being, but all of it comes from the outside. They don't speak from a place they have walked, but from where others once stood. They know a lot about truth, but have never lived in truth. A clear sign of this layer is the constant use of references. They often quote philosophers, scientists, saints, or anyone who seems more authoritative. Deep inside, there's always the urge to prove themselves right by leaning on the power of external knowledge. But this reliance itself is proof that they haven't touched truth with their own hands and heart. They believe that understanding is enough, but what they don't see is this. Understanding without seeing and without living is just another wall that separates them from themselves. At this stage, people easily fall into the illusion that they have already arrived. Because they can talk about deep things, others admire them, and so they start believing they are at a higher level of wisdom. But in truth, they are only lost in a maze of words. They repeat elevated terms without realizing that words are only pointers, not reality itself. They think they are moving forward, when in fact, they are just circling around concepts. A person in borrowed wisdom is like someone who tries to learn swimming by reading about it. They can describe the different strokes, the physics of buoyancy, even the anatomy of the human body in water. But if you push them into a pool, they flail in panic. And the sad part? The more they know, the harder it becomes to admit they have never truly known. But listen carefully. There is no shame in this layer. It is a necessary part of the journey. Everyone starts here. The real danger lies only in not daring to look back, not daring to admit how much of our wisdom is borrowed. When we cling to secondhand knowledge, knowledge becomes a prison, and wisdom turns into illusion. The first breakthrough comes when we recognize, yes, I am repeating what others said. And only then, the possibility opens to hear something else. The voice from within, where true wisdom can begin to rise. Layer 2, reflective wisdom. This marks a very important shift. It's no longer about collecting information from outside. It becomes a meeting with our own inner life. Here, we begin to doubt what we once believed. We no longer accept immediately what is taught or repeated. But unlike shallow rebellion, reflection doesn't come from impulsive resistance. It comes from a quiet depth, a gentle but persistent tension inside the mind. At this stage, one may still read books, still listen to teachers, but something has changed. There is now a pause before absorbing. A small pause, yet it signals the birth of real wisdom. Instead of swallowing everything, they begin to ask, is this true? Does this match my own lived experience? Who in me is believing this, and why? This shift often comes with inner conflict. Because now, a person must face the possibility that the things they trusted all along, even the ones tied to their identity, their past, their family, their religion, their cherished teachings may be nothing more than a shell. At this point, truth is no longer something as simple as a correct answer. It becomes a matter of survival. One can no longer rest easy, living on beliefs that have never been tested by their own direct experience. Reflective wisdom opens the door to self-inquiry. It is a stage where the ego begins to crack. A person is no longer indulgent with themselves. They see that they can be clever, yet still deceive themselves. They may argue sharply, yet avoid looking at the uncomfortable truth about who they really are. Here, people begin to notice the hidden motives behind their actions. They realize they believe something not because it is true, but because it feels safe. This recognition softens them. It makes them humble. No one can move to higher layers of wisdom without passing through this stage. This is the foundation of all awakening, whether in philosophy, in psychology, or in meditation. It is the first light, weak, fragile perhaps, but it begins to shine into the hidden corners of the mind. And once this light is lit, a person can no longer pretend. They may not yet know what truth is, but they begin to sense the scent of falsehood, especially within themselves. Reflective wisdom does not bring comfort. It makes us uneasy, but it is the kind of unease we need in order to step out of the safe zone of confusion. It doesn't hand us ready-made answers. Instead, it awakens in us a rare form of honesty. And that honesty is the very first seed of freedom. When a person stops being lenient with their own beliefs, when they no longer cling so easily to what they used to take for granted, that is the moment true wisdom begins to sprout. Layer 3. Embodied Wisdom. This is the stage where thought, knowledge, and lived experience begin to crystallize into a deeper kind of understanding. It no longer depends on words. If in the first 2 layers we were still leaning on the outside, or still wrestling within endless self-doubt, then at this stage, wisdom has begun to settle into the body and mind. The things once heard, once read, once questioned by now, they have either fallen away or been tested directly through lived experience. A person at this layer does not rush to share what they know, not because they are stingy with words, but because they understand. Some truths simply cannot be transmitted by speech. Every life experience, every wound endured, every moment of breaking, every act of letting go, each has left behind a layer of sediment. And from that sediment, a different kind of wisdom emerges, one that is not intellectual, but existential. It does not sit on the tip of the tongue. It rests quietly in the eyes, in the way they meet suffering, in the way they listen deeply, without interrupting. Embodied wisdom is not something one can show off. It doesn't shine with the glitter of intellectual brilliance, nor sparkle with eloquent words, yet it carries a certain weight, an unmistakable gravity. Not a weight that comes from authority or credentials, but from presence itself, from being fully here in every moment of life. A person with embodied wisdom is not easily shaken by surface-level arguments of right and wrong, nor by praise and blame, nor by the temptations of clever knowledge. They look at others not through academic titles, not through language, but through the quality of life that radiates from them. They see, does this person truly live what they speak, or are they just performing a refined role? Another sign of this layer is the ability to distinguish what is genuine from what is false. They don't need long arguments or technical analysis to sense it. They simply feel it. This discernment does not come from strategy or skill, but from a subtle sensitivity in the heart. They can hear what lies behind words. They can sense what has never been spoken. Why? Because they themselves have walked through those same turns. They have known loss, heartbreak, emptiness, and the stripping away of illusions. They have seen that everything external is just a temporary garment draped over what is real. Embodied wisdom does not try to appear intelligent. It does not try to impress. It's simply island. And from that presence, everything becomes clear, ordinary, yet profound. A person at this stage might stay silent through an entire conversation, but then just one word, spoken at the right moment, carries more weight than 1,000 arguments. At this stage, all noise begins to fade away. There is no need to prove anything, because their very presence has already become the proof of what they have seen. If borrowed wisdom is like light shining from the outside, if reflective wisdom is light turning inward, if embodied wisdom is a fire that quietly burns within warming, yet also capable of burning away falsehood, then here, wisdom has become something else entirely. This is the layer where words and life finally meet, where there is no gap between what one understands and how one lives. And precisely because of that, a person at this stage is trustworthy. Not because they tried to persuade, but because who they are already persuades. Layer 4. Selfless wisdom. This is the place where perception is no longer distorted by the need to affirm the self. It is not the wisdom of a person seeking to be right. It is the vision of a consciousness that has dropped the shadow of I. At this stage, the individual is no longer the center. They no longer use knowledge as a weapon to win arguments, to gain influence, or to decorate their image. And this transformation does not come from force, not from a willful attempt to crush the ego. It arises from a deep insight into the very nature of the ego itself, that it is only an illusion, a construct woven out of memory, habit, reaction, and the need to exist. When this is seen clearly, the mind no longer has to protect something called me, and from there, thoughts, feelings, and actions begin to flow with a deeper honesty because they are no longer driven by personal motive. Selfless wisdom no longer cares about being right or wrong by the standards of society or logic. It cares only about what is truly here, right now. A person at this stage can listen to an argument without needing to interfere, not because they lack reasoning, but because they already see what is moving underneath it all. They see the ego thirsting for recognition, fighting to sustain its idea of self. While others are still debating, they have already seen the entire mechanism of the mind at work, and this gives them a silence. A silence that is not emptiness, but depth. At this layer, people no longer cling to any ideology, be it religion, philosophy, or science. They can use those languages to communicate, yes, but they no longer identify with any of them. Because they have seen, every ideology is a product of time, culture, and collective consciousness. Nothing is absolute. And so they live in a freedom that does not need to resist nor reject anyone. They are no longer trapped inside the prison of any right or wrong. Selfless wisdom often comes with a kind of inner silence, not the silence of suppression, but the natural silence that arises when there is no more need to display. Where others react, they simply observe. Where others analyze, they simply recognize. Where others cling to reasoning, they quietly see the subtle play of cause and effect unfolding. Not because they try to be spiritual, but because their mind has become transparent before reality. A person at this layer often makes others feel lighter, even without doing anything in particular. They do not convince anyone, yet their presence itself becomes a wordless illumination. They no longer need to be heard, but if they do speak, their words carry an exact stillness. Not eloquence, but precision. Not cleverness, but clarity, going straight into what has been hidden. And because there is no someone inside who needs to be elevated or defended, all they're seeing becomes free. Selfless wisdom is like a still lake. It does not try to reflect, yet everything that approaches is revealed in perfect clarity. And it is precisely this absence of effort that makes the seeing so profound, because there is no I standing in the middle to interpret. What is seen exactly as it island. Nothing added, nothing taken away. And in that pure seeing, concepts dissolve. Only the naked functioning of reality remains. Layer 5. Wordless wisdom. This is the final layer. It is where even the very concept of wisdom dissolves. Here, there is no longer someone who knows, and there is nothing that needs to be known. All attempts to explain, to describe, to analyze become unnecessary. Because reality does not need to be named in order to exist. What is in its purest presence is already complete, whole, without requiring any self to confirm it. At this layer, a person no longer lives through thought, not because they reject thinking, but because thought is no longer the center of control. The mind becomes like a quiet, open space. Each arising, each passing phenomenon is fully received, but leaves no trace behind. They no longer strive to understand anything, because they have seen that the very effort to understand creates distance between themselves and life. When the self is silent, truth resounds. Not in words, but in direct presence. Wordless wisdom is not the opposite of ignorance, and it is not the peak of cleverness either. It moves beyond all dualities, beyond right and wrong, light and dark, enlightenment and delusion. All opposites dissolve into a rounded, whole seeing. At this stage, one no longer feels they are practicing, learning, or growing. They simply live each moment fully. Outwardly, they might appear very ordinary. They work, chat, laugh, eat, wash dishes just like anyone else. But deep inside, there is no central controller, no inner manager deciding, is this right? What should I say? What will people think of me? Because the me has dissolved into everything. And when there is no longer anyone standing apart, every action flows naturally. Pure, simple, effortless. People at this layer often look unremarkable, even mistaken for being nothing special. They don't speak lofty words. They don't display themselves as wise. They don't try to be different. Yet, if you are around them long enough, you begin to sense something. A deep stillness. A presence as gentle as the wind, yet as clear as sunlight. They carry no agenda, no performance. Only a complete, quiet presence. They do not need your admiration. They do not need your recognition. Because within them, there is no one left to be recognized. Wordless wisdom cannot be achieved by effort. It cannot be reached by climbing step by step. It reveals itself only when every effort stops. When the hunger to be wise ends. When all striving for enlightenment dissolves. When every label of self has fallen away. Only then can what has always been here be seen. Not through the eyes, not through the mind, but through the emptiness of itself. If we must use an image, wordless wisdom is like sunlight. It does not choose where to shine. It does not set a goal. It does not need anyone to confirm it is shining. It's simply island. And its very presence is illumination. A person at this stage is the same. They are no longer someone who knows. They have become knowing itself. At the end, there is no longer someone who sees. There is only seeing itself. Limitless, ownerless, wordless. When you have walked through all 5 layers of wisdom, what remains is not a new definition. It is not another system of knowledge for you to remember or to use later. What remains is only a quiet question echoing inside you. Where am I living from? Am I living from a self that gathers knowledge? Or from a transparent mirror with nothing left to defend? Each layer of wisdom has its reason to exist. None of them are wrong. But if we stay too long in one layer, life begins to harden into a frame, and we get stuck inside the very understanding we once thought was truth. Some remain trapped in borrowed wisdom, thinking they have truly seen. Some stay stuck in reflective wisdom, thinking they are awakened. Some rest in embodied wisdom, turning it into a measure to judge others. Even at the stage of selfless wisdom, if there is still the idea of selfless, then it has not yet completely stepped out of the shadow of the ego. Only in wordless wisdom, where there is no one walking, no one understanding, do we see clearly. Wisdom is not something to accumulate. It is what remains when there is nothing left to cling to. No more me as the seer. No more that as the seen. Only pure seeing, without purpose, without shape, yet it becomes the foundation for a life that is awake and free. And so, the real question is not, how many layers of wisdom have you reached? The real question is, are you living from that truth right now? Do you dare to remain silent before what you have not truly seen? Do you dare to release the very knowledge that once gave you comfort? Do you have the courage not to become anyone at all? Not to understand anything more, but simply to live fully in what is? Wisdom is not for display, not for debate, not for persuading others. True wisdom, if it is truly wisdom, will make you live more simply, more honestly, with fewer explanations, but with more presence. It will draw you away from the noise of knowledge and into the stillness of a nameless knowing. And if, after this journey, you can sit quietly, let the mind loosen a little, and listen to the sound of life moving inside you, perhaps true wisdom has already begun to gently touch you, not through concepts, not through philosophy, but through its unconditional presence. Thank you for walking together with me here with us. Until we meet again in the next episode, I wish you and your family peace, health, and a life touched by quiet clarity.